Your hosts are The Great Order and No White Guilt, and this is The After Party. The crown winner of last week is Hallander, financially gifting $100 US. Thank you so very much, and congratulations to you. In second place, we have the one and only JP, financially gifting $50. Congratulations to you as well, and thank you as well. Folks, you can financially gift on Entropy at 15%, where you can also watch the stream. You can also ask and vote on questions over there. It'll be up in a moment. And you can also financially gift on Cash App at no cost to you. Both URLs are in the description below. And as you know, Jared and I evenly share the financial gifts with our guests here on The After Party. Now, today we have Carlisle Cockatoo on tap with us. Carlisle, please introduce yourself to our esteemed community. Tell them where they can find you. And then Mr. George will take us into this conversation. And you will have, there you are.
So I'm Carlisle, and I am a staffer in the political sphere. And so I sometimes come on and talk about political and legislative issues, and I really can't be found anywhere. It's kind of it's sort of restrictive with my job, social media and so forth. So this is where I can be found.
Yeah, I was going to say probably better that way for you, but we appreciate you being here. And for anyone that's interested, that Carlisle's been on Going Free and the After Party previously, of course. You can search her name, Carlisle, on the afterparty.tv. That rhymed. Wasn't intentional. Maybe a new song's coming through that. The afterparty.tv, the shared site Jason and I have for these live shows, and the catalog is all there. But today, Carlisle is returning just to fill us in a little bit about her insider information and what she's seeing about this interesting bill that's being proposed about making sure that, well, their intention is so that flights in the United States would require a vaccination pass to board to book a flight. And that's going to be big news if it goes through. I don't know much about it, so I'm going to be learning on the fly with all of you as Carlisle explains it to us, how far along it is in the process, how likely it might be that this passes. Obviously, it would be really big news if it is. And of course, from there, we're going to relate that to the work that we do here, specifically celebrating that Jason has iteration 2 of the second edition of Going Free that has recently come out, as you should all know. And we're going to talk about how some of the proposed legislation and the goings on right now, all the craziness that we sometimes have to talk about, and we have to report for you here, relates to what Jason writes in his book and the curatives, the meme curatives to counter the signaling and the anti-white messages that you'll get from the news around this and people trying to justify this kind of thing. So having said that, Carlisle, thank you and welcome. And why don't you just begin to set up where this bill is coming from, who's proposing it, what the thought is behind it, and develop it from there.
So this was actually introduced on August 6th, and it was brought forward by Representative Torres. He is in one of the districts in New York, and obviously he calls himself a Democrat. They're all kind of the same a lot of the time, but it seems that the Democrats push more of this, and then the Republicans, of course, pretend to push back, and that's a whole separate issue. But so anyway, he is a Democrat, and it's HR 4980, and here comes the dog. It's and the synopsis of it is to direct the Secretary of Homeland Security to ensure that any individual traveling on a flight that departs from or arrives to an airport inside the United States or a territory of the United States is fully vaccinated against COVID-19 and for other purposes. And that's always interesting when they write for other purposes in, because it leaves it vague and it allows them then to fill that with other details. So anytime you see that in legislation, you always want to kind of pay attention because that means they have other things in mind, but they're just not going to tell you right up front. So,
actually, if I could stop you for 1 sec, I want to hear about what those other things might be, because we'll take our time developing this. And I also have to ask, give us your dog's name again, because we have kind of a fourth guest here. I know he's a big guy.
This is Brian, and
I love it when dogs have human names. Some people don't like that.
And Brian is a black
actually
lab.
endearing a lot of the time.
And he's a mess, is what he is. So he was actually a service dog in training. So he has been to the congressional buildings, and he has sat in committees and so forth because he was in training for a while. I was training him for a service dog agency, and then I was going to give him up for somebody, to work for someone. Unfortunately, Brian does not have the motivation to actually work for a living. He must be more of a Democrat. He would just earn his living for free, and so he's more of a dog and less of a service dog, and he did not pass the training program. So I adopted him.
It's very kind of you that you adopted him. I'm sure there was a bit of bonding from your end too. I would imagine it would have been hard to give him up.
It is hard to give them up. He was the second one I've done, and the first one actually did graduate, and it was heartbreaking to say goodbye, but bittersweet, because you're going to help somebody. Of course, this person's life. So, but still, it is hard. And so now
it worked out for you that he wasn't cut out. That's funny. He wasn't cut out to be a service dog.
Oh no, he was not cut out there. Like, he does not have the temperament. He made it through the first 15 months of the program, and it wasn't until they took him, like, I was getting him only on the weekends at that point, and they had him Monday through Friday at the training service center. And that's when they were like, no, he's not going to work for us. I mean, they should have known when I said, when he goes to stay at the kennel with you guys, he's going to need a pillow, because he goes to sleep with a pillow in his mouth. That should have been like a red flag. Like, clearly he had some, he wasn't going to be as adaptable as they would like them to be, and that kind of thing. He has to fall asleep with a pillow in his mouth every night. And they were like, a pillow? They were like, no, he can't bring a pillow to the kennel. So that should have been a red flag. Yeah.
He's a little too sensitive. I can sympathize. If I were a dog, I think I'd just want to be a dog. We'll cut him some slack. But anyway, so what do you okay, so I had stopped you at these are always pretexts to sneak other things in or go in bigger directions in the future. So do you have any thoughts? Are you able to speak to that before we go on?
Well, with this bill, I would imagine that what they're kind of setting that up for, because another interesting verbiage that they used with this was, they said they will give the Department of Homeland Security and the TSA all resources necessary to make sure that everyone is vaccinated on the flights. And I would imagine that that's going to have something to do with being able to access, in part at least, your medical records, because they're going to need to know, when were you vaccinated and what doctor vaccinated you. And I mean, that's a major HIPAA violation. But of course, if the federal government violates something, then that's never a violation. That's just what they need to do. So, I would imagine that that's what this is about, is that they're going to leave it open so that, any and all resources necessary is going to mean access to your private medical records.
Carla, I also had one other thought before you go on. And again, I'm seeing more people are coming into the chat. We're going to be relating this to some of the iteration 2 of second edition going free, and some of the meme curatives that Jason articulates in that, and how the going free work and the lexicon relates to news like this. But one other thought that I had before you go on, another key term that popped out at me, Carlisle, was fully vaccinated. And the fact that the more news we see indicates that that's not a static thing. It's a rolling thing with the boosters. So that is concerning to me as well. And I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts on that, because it's not a stable thing, and they keep moving the goalposts. If things were to continue going in the direction that they are, and I don't like people to despair, because I don't think that all of this is a guaranteed thing. I think we need to keep that in mind. So we're living at a very topsy-turvy, chaotic, transitionary time, and there's confusion in that, but there's also silver lining in that. It doesn't mean that this is exactly what life's going to be like from here on out, ever and ever. But having said that, yes, the fully vaccinated thing, and that definition can continue to change with the boosters. It could be, you could have in a year from now the third vaccination, and then they say, well, you need this booster now, or you can't get on a flight. It's a perpetual carrot and stick sort of thing.
Exactly. And I agree with you. I don't think people should despair. I think the saying that sunlight is the best disinfectant applies to things like this, because when you peel back the layers and you make people aware of things like this, then they're able to push back. Like the doctor that made those awful comments about hurting or killing white people in the speech that she gave at Yale. People became aware of that, and then they were able to push back on that, and they were able to get, her practice, no longer functioning, or her license looked at. So, I mean, when enough people are aware of a situation, then it doesn't have to be just gloom and despair. And this is not a sure thing. I mean, people are going to push back, but yeah, I think that fully vaccinated is an interesting term, and you're right. They are coming out with more and more boosters, and it's like now they're like, oh, you can mix and match. So like now they're saying if you got the Moderna, then it's okay to follow up with a booster from Johnson & Johnson, which is crazy to me because they're not even the same. I mean, at one point, one was 2 shots to get a full dose, and the other was only 1 shot. So how is it possible then that you could have the more powerful one that didn't require 2 shots, and then you're still going to need a booster of the other one? I mean, that makes no sense. But I would also think that then this kind of leaves the door open for them to require other vaccinations to get on a plane. So, then they can just start pulling all kinds of vaccinations out. Have you been vaccinated for this? Or they'll create a new vaccination that you have to, to be safe, to keep everybody safe. So it's really going to open up a whole door for them.
Really quickly, I just want to say that for everybody who's just showing up, and then earlier, what Carlisle was saying was that this is about all flights that are departing from the United States and arriving in the United States. So they could be coming from someplace else as well. And if this were to pass, it would require everyone who gets on the plane to be fully vaccinated, which, of course, as Mr. George just mentioned and Carlisle confirmed, is a rolling thing. And that definition changes. And one need not conclude that these sort of requirements, if people submit to them, would end. One should not. Would end at something like a vaccination, as if that's not bad enough to interfere in one's health. To force you to take a medical treatment is a very big step, and who knows where else it could go. But so that's what we're talking about here today, is this bill that anti-whites who call themselves Democrats, some of them who anti-whites who call themselves Republicans are in favor of, and then there are, as Carlisle pointed out, anti-whites who call themselves Republicans who pretend to push back against something like this. So you will continue to vote for them and send them back to the public trough, and they can continue to live very fabulous lives with the wealth that is paid to them out of the taxpayer base, all of the additions that go along with being in the positions, such as being in front of the media and etc., perquisites, the fame or infamy, depending upon who your audience is, that sort of thing. That's really what they're there for. But it is important to hear about these things. And when it comes down to a broad victimization, such as would take place with this. Now, there are going to be exemptions, of course, but we'll get to that at some point. We'll talk about that at some point, because that's how the anti-whites work. It's like these royal waivers. They're going to force everyone to suffer, but then they hand out these waivers for certain groups and certain individuals. But there'll be many, many people who are going to end up being vaccinated. And so they're, affected by this requirement for vaccination in order to fly. And so there's going to be a lot of pushback from it, from a lot of different quarters, people who are normally not on the same side of a contest. But I just wanted to mention that so for folks who were showing up, so they had an idea of what we were talking about here. And so I'll just go ahead and pass it back now.
And I just wanted to say too, it looks like somebody in the chat said that they hope that talking about the vaccination doesn't get your channel banned. And I thought about that, but we're not discussing the vaccination. Like, I'm not saying that I'm pro or against vaccination. I think people should do what works for them. What I am against is forcing people to make medical choices that they don't want to do, to do something that already is a given right. That's what I'm against, and that's what I'm concerned about with this bill. The vaccination, I think people should make their own choice. I'm glad it's there. I have family members that have been vaccinated because they felt that it was in their best interest. There are some populations that maybe it is in their best interest, and there are some people that work around people who are constantly ill or what have you, and then maybe it does work for you. So I definitely think that, for some people it might make sense, but it doesn't make sense, and I don't think it's right to force everyone to do it just because somebody in charge has decided. That's not the way we've ever worked with any vaccination. So I'm not singling out the COVID vaccination, and I would feel this way if it was about the flu vaccination too.
How, on that note, how does this dovetail or interact with the laws we already have on the books in the United States regarding requirements of vaccination and medical records and everything that's relevant to this discussion right now?
Yeah.
How does it connect to that, and how easy / hard do you think it would be to renege or go against or ignore the laws and precedents that have been on the books in United States codes and laws up until this point?
Yeah, and see, that I think is the main pushback, is that we do have the HIPAA laws, and so you don't have to disclose up until this point. You don't have to disclose your medical information to get on a plane. I mean, even as somebody who has helped to train service dogs, you don't even have to disclose what your disability is for bringing a dog on a plane. You just have to say, I have a disability, and therefore this is my service dog. And that's abused a lot, but that's the law, is that they cannot ask you to describe your disability. They can ask you what the dog specifically is trained to do, but they can't ask you what your disability is. And it's kind of the same situation here. It would be a much different scenario if you were allowed to be questioned on your health status for everything that you did. Are they going to be able to ask for your vaccination record at the grocery store? It has the possibility to get really out of hand. And I think that is probably the main pushback here, is that we do have the HIPAA laws, and it's never before been done that you have to provide vaccination status to participate in a voluntary public action. As a consumer, you've never had to give your vaccination record to buy something before. And that's what we're entering into now.
Carlisle, on this subject of the laws, obviously with domestic flights, it concerns the entire country, so it's federal in scope. Are there any potential pushbacks from the state level? Could there be states that say, well, in our airports within the borders of our state, we don't want to enforce that? Could we see, like we've been seeing with some of the other issues going on with school mandates, mask mandates, that there will be certain states that want this and certain states that don't, and there being a gridlock due to that?
I guess that's a possibility. And I guess to that point as well, I don't know if you've been following this, but a lot of the lawsuits, the newest lawsuits that have been, people have begun pushing back by hiring attorneys. So companies that are requiring vaccinations, because the federal government says if you have more than, I think is it 90 employees, that you need to require vaccination for everybody's safety. So people are pushing back on that. Those lawsuits are being struck down. Judges are not hearing them, or they're being thrown out. I have not yet heard of one that has been allowed to secure a court date and go forward. So, and I don't know what the standards are, but it's really interesting that they're being struck down like that. And I wonder if the same thing would happen if states tried to take a stand. I know that with the federal mask mandate, like you said, some states pushed back on that, but in the end, a lot of them, even Florida, for a short time, kind of acquiesced to that demand, because at the end of the day, the federal government controls the purse strings for the states, and the states get their money from the federal government. So for the most part, they're going to cooperate.
Mm-hmm. And the airlines don't have any leverage to push back either. I mean, we've seen this back and forth with Southwest over the last week or two. But if it's a federal law, there's just zero leverage airlines have.
I mean, let's be honest, after the COVID bailouts that the airlines have received from the federal government, the airlines are all but owned by the federal government at this point, because there was a point in time when people weren't flying because of all the mask mandates and because of all the fear and the craziness and the chaos out there, and different laws in different states, and people didn't know what was allowed and what wasn't. There were a lot of empty planes. The federal government gave the aviation industry a significant amount of money, and so I would imagine the airlines don't feel that they're in a position to push back.
Funny how that worked out, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, makes you wonder.
It's important too, of course, the airlines, is that as you are legally required, and of course the people who make it to the top are thieves in most businesses, regrettably. And so being able to get money for nothing, providing no service, just getting it directly from the taxpayer to bolster whatever your business might be, that's the direction of least resistance. So they'll happily apply any rules, even if it means halving their flights and the number of planes they have. Why would it matter? As long as their money continues to pour in, they don't care. One of the things I wanted to mention was that we have the meme curative in iteration 2 of the 2nd edition. That is, privacy isn't only for criminals. And it's something that is important to keep on the tip of your tongue when talking with friends, family, and strangers, because very often you'll find people who are, bovine-like in their natures, and they'll say, "Well, I haven't done anything wrong, so I don't mind." These are the same kind of people that were fine with the naked body scanners. These are and they'll say these ignorant statements of, "Well, I'm fine with him being able to look at all my medical records because I haven't been a drug addict, or I haven't had all of these medical treatments as a result of illegal substances or what have you." Well, privacy is not only for criminals, and that's something that we need to guard just fanatically, because anti-whites are wont to be as tyrannical as possible, and they will take everything away from you, all of your freedoms, all of your liberty. We need to be able to put these people in their place when they say that, well, they haven't done anything wrong, and say they don't mind if the government goes through all of their things. By the way, it's always hypocritical, because these same people who behave this way, when an oppositional party, a party that they don't like, a party maybe that's getting in the way, or an organization that's getting in the way somehow, almost always unintentionally, of anti-whites inflicting victimization on Western kind and Western civilization, then these people who suddenly were holier than thou about how they've done nothing wrong in their lives, and they don't mind the government intruding and taking complete control, then they're suddenly push back against the government. Then they suddenly say, and whatever their organization might be. And it's worthwhile to point out to these people that as well, and then ask them gently if it is anti-whiteism that's motivating these decisions. perhaps if you have a relative, I know people, or a friend I know people who have said such things that, well, they've never done anything wrong, so they're fine with the government invading their privacy, that then had a lot of problems with the government invading their privacy when Trump was in office. So it can be valuable to point that out as well, and then point out how it's an anti-white position that they're taking. But I wanted to toss that in so folks have something, a tool they can use in their lives that is likely to be able to remedy a problem, or that will remedy a problem that's likely to show itself when discussing this issue right here.
Yeah, and privacy is a valid concern with something like this because, let's be honest, where is this medical data of yours going to go? They're not going to destroy it instantly. It's going to be in some database then, so that the next time you fly, they know what your status is. So they're going to have a lot of medical records on people, and sometimes those databases get hacked, or more often, sometimes certain things are selectively leaked about people that the agency maybe doesn't care for. So if they find out that, you maybe are not vaccinated or what have you, or even if you are, but let's say that you are, I don't know, against the anti-white agenda, or you hold, any sort of oppositional belief to the government, wouldn't it be a shame if your medical records were leaked? And wouldn't it be a shame if you had one time been treated for an STD or something really embarrassing, and then all of a sudden it's leaked and, that's public knowledge, and, oh, we're so sorry, it was hacked, we can't do anything about it? Because that happens a lot. The IRS was weaponized with that exact premise when, during the Obama years, when certain businesses and the nonprofits that were against some of the administration's policies were suddenly had information come out about them that was not flattering. So, and again, that's selectively done.
I'm curious about the procedural aspect for a second. So obviously you said it was proposed by, what is it, congressman in New York, but then I would imagine it has to be sponsored by other people in the government. Is that so for this kind of bill?
Yes,
Are there others who are signing on to it?
Yes, sir. So it is right now. It was proposed by Representative Torres, and then he has since had multiple other Democrats sign on to it, and I believe a couple of Republicans recently also signed on to it, for the public good, because, they just want to do what's going to protect everybody. And then it has been referred to the Committee for Homeland Security. And that is another really important part of this bill, is that it's being brought to the Department of Homeland Security to be involved in. So why are they doing that? Because TSA right now has jurisdiction over who gets on a plane. I mean, honestly, if you show up, a little intoxicated to your flight, the TSA can say, no, you're not boarding. So they can already handpick people off. Why does the Department of Homeland Security need to be involved? Well, here's why. Because they want to make it so that if you somehow circumvent the vaccination requirements, or maybe you fraudulently obtain some note from a doctor saying that you've been vaccinated, and they find out about it, they want to be able to try you as a domestic terrorist, in the same way that they would try somebody who tried to, do harm to the plane or threaten the flight crew or something like that. They want to be able to bring those charges against people who are unvaccinated and on the plane.
And that's a whole different procedure than what we normally think of as court procedure. It's terrorist, right?
Yeah, if you're charged with domestic terrorism, that's federal, and that is not good. You're gonna go to prison.
Yeah, you're not looking at the same kind of trial that you see on TV.
No, you don't. You don't have the appeals, and you don't have. It's not going to be like, oh, it was a misdemeanor, and this is the first time they've ever done anything wrong, so it's going to be probation. No, if you're charged with domestic terror on an airline, you're going to prison. So, and they wanted it to be that way. So, I mean, just consider that. So, your government is taking actions to try to make it so that if you were to circumvent vaccination requirements and get on an airplane, they can then charge you at the same level that they would charge someone who tried to bring a bomb onto the plane and blow it up. Like, that's crazy. That's how badly they want to be able to dictate what you put in your body.
How far along in the process is this?
So it's been introduced, and then it's been heard by it's been introduced to the Department of Homeland Security Committee. It hasn't gone, I don't believe it's gone to the Public Transportation Committee. That will be the next stop. And then after that, if it passes through, I think it will pass through the Department of Homeland Security Committee. I don't know. Public transportation might have some pushback. But then if it does reach the actual floor for a vote, that is when, it would be, but I mean, that's crazy to think that this would even reach the floor for a vote. Like who actually feels that, this is obviously the best solution to just, mandate that everyone that get on a plane have this vaccine, and not just that you say you have it, but that you have to prove. And then to get an exemption, you would have to prove that you were fighting cancer or you had some serious immune disorder, and they are going to be pushing on doctors really hard to not write exemptions. So the doctor will then have to prove to the federal government that they wrote the exemption with, good reason. So then there's more of your medical records scrutinized by the federal government. So it's really crazy that this would even make it to the floor, but it very well might, under the conditions that are currently being set, where there's just constant propaganda and constant fear about COVID and so forth. It might actually make it to the floor.
It sounds like Brian, the dog, is getting a little upset there.
He is. He has dropped his bone there, Brian.
I don't think he likes the sound of. I don't think he likes the sound of this. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think we know where he's. I think I know where he stands on this issue.
He doesn't like the idea of being vaccinated.
Given your knowledge of DC right now and how the House is split, and it doesn't really matter how it's split, because as we know, some Republicans are going to go for this too. If it gets to the floor, I don't want to get too speculative, but do you think that it could go through?
I think it could go through, because I think that there are enough Democrat votes, and the Democrats vote as a bloc, and so I think that it could actually make it through. And also the Senate, I believe if it makes it through Congress, then I think it could definitely make it through the Senate. Because then if the Senate reaches a tie, then Kamala Harris would be the tiebreaker, and she would definitely push it through.
Is there any potential pushback in the way that it could affect the U.S. economy, with tourism, with business people, with diplomats flying in from other countries? Because obviously this is going to mean that anyone taking international flights into the United States from anywhere else on the planet, they're going to need to have some kind of proof of vaccination from their country as well, right?
Right, and that has been a thing. I mean, already there are countries that are requiring vaccination, and so that's definitely
for landing in their airports.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember any of which countries those are?
I don't, but it doesn't seem like the UK or no. Who is it that requires? Is it Australia? Somebody does require.
I wouldn't be surprised. We've spoken of our friend Lovely Porridge recently, Jason, and I don't remember him speaking about flights, but we do know that in some of the states there particularly, it is quite intense, one of the most intense places in the world right now with all of this.
They are intense. It's crazy, the things that are going on in Australia.
Yeah, but I was going to ask you that anyway, if there were other countries that are thinking of passing a similar bill, but you're saying you can't remember off the top of your head, but you have seen that there are some that already require this. Yeah,
I think, or maybe it was just during, was it?
No, it's right now. I just had my physical the other day, and the doctor told me that many countries are many is what she said, countries are requiring the COVID vaccination to land and stay in
Wow.
those countries.
I know Hawaii has been doing it as a state now for a while. Just because of my job, some people have come, when you need help, you tend to go to your representative or what have you. And people have been, people that have booked trips are really frustrated because, but Hawaii as a state can make that requirement without the federal government. So.
I wasn't aware of that with Hawaii. That's interesting to know. to cancel our yearly tap company conference in Hawaii and Honolulu. That's a shame.
Well, Hawaii was also the state that has the gun registry, where they require everyone register their gun, and they're trying to make that a federal thing. Here, there's several bills on the floor right now, but it's interesting that Hawaii is like in the forefront of that.
In the wider sense, to you both and to anyone in the chat, given what we've seen so far, pushback in certain industries or among certain segments of the population, what's your sense of how the public discourse is going to change if this really starts to make it through the different rungs and all of a sudden we're seeing news that this is being voted on and it could very well be a reality that people have to contend with?
I think, it's hard to say, because if you would have asked me that question like 2 years ago, and you would have been like, what do you think people would say if the government said that everyone had to wear a mask every time they left their house? I would have been like, people would never tolerate that. But then they did. So when push came to shove, everyone did tolerate it. So I really don't know what the discourse would be. I would hope that people would push back. And again, not because I'm saying anything negative about the vaccination, just because I think that it should be your right to decide what goes into your body. I think it's interesting that Nancy Pelosi and a lot of the Democrats, it's my body, my choice, but not when it comes to this. With this issue, it is only the government's choice to decide what goes in your body, and you're not smart enough to know what's best for you, is what they're saying.
And how terrifying this is. The people are so willing. It really also demonstrates the meekness, the submissiveness of which populations are the most beat down by anti-whiteism. We see a broader swath of the population just meekly submitting to whatever the authority figures in the buildings and the supposedly hallowed buildings order of them. And then how easy it is to scare them. And then once frightened, they are just on that course. Something that I noticed as an aside, as we're talking about this, is that when this, near the beginning of COVID, and once again, I'll just state very clearly again, we're not speaking on the use of the vaccine, how the different vaccines for COVID, how well one works or doesn't work, or any of that. We're not passing any judgments on that, or whether or not people should take them. We're not passing any judgments on that. And specifically, we also, as white positive individuals serving white well-being in the practice for going free, we don't sectarianize over some exterior issue. We will use the issue to talk about what's happening with the country, our countries, the entirety of the West, in order to bring people to white positivity, in order to introduce them to the 5 key concepts and things of that nature. But something I wanted to point out is that early on, when the reports were coming out about the seriousness of COVID-19, that those who that what I was in contact with, who are anti-white all the way to radically anti-white, vague anti-whitish all the way to radically anti-white, they were really reluctant to don the masks, and they thought it was quite silly. And it reminded me of studies, which I'm sure never actually happened. You'll have to check with CNN about this inability of people who consider themselves to be leftists, of course, anti-whites, who call themselves leftists. I'm sure there were not any studies that showed these people, showed groups of people images, and every now and again the images were pretty neutral. Sometimes they would be happy, and then sometimes it would be something like an image of a tiger leaping at you. And those who identified in these studies that never happened, identified as leftists or liberals or progressive or things like that, had a delayed or a retarded reaction to the threat. They didn't notice the threat right away, and I thought I saw that. Of course, the studies never happened. You can just ask CNN. But I thought I saw that in the beginning when you had all of these anti-whites who call themselves things like progressive, and they were reluctant. There was no danger there to be had. It came from China, and therefore it's going to be fine. It's a non-white country. You're very silly to be concerned about the dangers. However, as soon as anti-white leadership in DC and across the West began saying, okay, now you're going to wear the mask. Now we're going to take away the rest of your freedoms. Now, in the midst of that, we're also going to pull down, white erase all of these statues and history and everything else going on across the West. We're going to make sure that all happens at the same time. Suddenly, these people who were recalcitrant on like this hobbled, broken limbs that just didn't want to go along with what the government wanted them to do, or didn't see any fear or danger in the videos that were coming out of China at the time, where people were face planting, walking down the sidewalk. I'm sure we'll be told at some point that those videos were never released in the US, or who knows. Suddenly these people were demanding that the rest of us submit to the government, submit to this anti-white authority, again, hypocritically, because with Trump in office, it was not going to do anything that he says. In fact, didn't the vice presidential candidate, didn't actually she say in the debate that not if Trump tells me to do it, I'm not going to do it? So, I mean, it couldn't be more blatant that you're dealing with half-witted children who are also capable of murder and everything else that anti-whites are known for doing, that in charge of these institutions of power, the greatest on planet Earth. But something that I wanted to point out, because again, I know these studies never happened, but this delayed or retarded, in the literal sense of the word, not as mocking, reaction to danger is something that I definitely saw from the very beginning. But here we're talking about, and I think I'll just go ahead and introduce it, and so we can keep rolling. Here we're talking about an overwhelming power represented by the anti-whites in government, state government, county government, federal government, and we have the MC in iteration 2, that when you are outgunned, you die with arms and you win with brains. When you are outgunned, you die with arms and you win with brains. So every single argument that white sympathetic people make, that even if it only implies violence, which a demonstration of strength is an implication of violence, is a death sentence for those who are making that threat, is a life-ruining sentiment and statement for those who are making that threat. More importantly, it does nothing. It can do nothing. When you are outgunned, you die with arms, but you win with brains. And that's what we're using here when it comes to white well-being. We're using our brains. So when you talk with these people, and you'll very often, these will be friends of yours, maybe relatives in the white sympathetic sphere, and they're talking about displays of strength, just be sure to point this out to them, that how futile and actually deleterious, dangerous it is, maybe even suicidal, but certainly not productive at all. A room full of men shouting while some speaker at the front of the room shouts some sort of speech back at them. That is a demonstration of strength. And a demonstration of strength is a threat of violence. And a threat of violence, against the anti-whites who control all of the centers of violence, where violence is made legal, is the dumbest thing that a person could possibly do. Please run away from that, run away from them, and bring your friends with you.
All right, just have a quick thing for the record before you respond to what Jason said, Carlisle. I was trying to look it up when Jason was speaking. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it. Maybe it's been buried. But just for anyone that wants to possibly look it up, I don't know if it's the same study, but for this study that didn't happen that Jason was just referring to, a couple of years ago, it was particularly, I was reading literature in an imaginary journal because the study didn't happen, or it might have been a dream, but it was a city college of New York. So in New York City, it's CUNY. Köhne was a professor who did a study, an extensive study on generally liberal versus conservative psychology, reactions to things. One of the interesting things from this that I particularly remember is that even though the liberal is supposed to be more nimble in their mindset and creative and open as far as the stereotype goes, it was actually conservative people who were better able to put themselves into the shoes of a liberal and imagine what the world looks like from their eyes than vice versa, than a liberal, for all the so-called empathy they have, had a very hard time even being able to theoretically put themselves into the shoes of a conservative and countenance the world and try to understand and build a bridge to what their world might look like and what their values might be. So that's something to look up. I just wanted to put it out there for anyone interested. Maybe you'll have better luck than I did when I was just quickly on the fly, as we're on air right now, trying to find this Köhne study. So that's City University of New York. I know there was a professor there that did a lot of research on this. So there's just something for you all, if you're listening live or in replay, you might want to look into. That may or may not be the same study that Jason was just referring to. Anyway, after that PSA, yeah, I'm just curious now. I'm just going to turn it over to you, Carlisle. Please tell us any thoughts you may have on any of this.
Yeah, I have heard that's, I don't know if it's the same study, but I have heard that there was a study done that showed that those who call themselves liberals are actually more likely to be unable to tolerate oppositional views than the other side. And I would say that maybe that has something to do with the fact that if everything is always going your way, then you don't have to tolerate oppositional views and you don't have to be able to empathize or see from the other point of view, because you're getting everything you want all the time and you're being told that you are always right, and that's being reinforced by, your views are being reinforced by the laws that are being put in place and the policies and everything else. So I would say it might have something to do with the fact that they've never been told they have to. The other side, things are not always going their way. Most of the time they don't. And so they have no choice but to try to kind of wrap their minds around it and see why people would want these policies and these laws and so forth. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I have heard of that. I would also say that I agree very much with the sentiment that, people encouraging any sort of violence or any sort of pushback like that, that's completely non-productive. And you don't want to ever let yourself get to the point where this kind of information or what's going on in the world or, the laws or the legislation that's being proposed makes you feel that you need to act out in that way, because that will be completely non-productive for the cause, and it makes everything look really bad. As far as people pushing back, it gives the opposition the leg to stand on that they need to push forward with their agenda. So.
Yeah, the image I have used in the past is you're going up to a tank and shouting at it, and then acting as if being a big man and shouting at a tank is doing something. You say to your friend, "Hey, I did something. I'm standing up. I'm a man." You're shouting at you're a guy with no armor walking up to a tank. This tank can roll over you in 2 seconds if it wants to. But Jason, give us the meme curative again about being outgunned and what the approach is.
When you are outgunned, you die with arms, but win with brains.
And that is one of the best summations of what you do and what we do here in this community.
Here's Brian again, but hopefully
Ryan,
he will be quieter.
I know I asked you when you were on back in the summer, but what kind of breed is Brian? It sounds like you have a bear in your house, not a dog.
Well, that is so funny because I was at the park not too long ago and someone actually said, it looks like you're walking a baby bear. So Brian has put on a little bit of COVID weight. And he has a little bit of a weight issue, but we are not fat shaming here. We're not body shaming. But he's put on a little weight. He has some issues with counter surfing, which we're working on. And he's a big dog. So he's a black lab, and he was bred to be a wheelchair assistance dog. So they bred this litter very big. So when Brian stands up, he can almost put his paws on my shoulders, like if he stands up on his back legs. So he's perfect height for the counters. And that is a real challenge. So he will eat whatever he comes in contact with. So he has definitely put on the COVID 15 and a little bit more. So he does look like a little bear. And when he lumbers through my house, it sounds like an adult. Like he outweighs me. When we walk at the park, he kind of decides which direction we go, because he's almost 130 pounds and I'm 108 pounds. So we are not in the same weight class anymore.
It must be a little tough to walk, but you must feel safe with him. I'll say that. Well,
except that he tends to, he would be real distracted if somebody like pulled something edible out of their pocket and threw it. I think he would kind of be like, you're on your own. I mean, that guy just threw bacon across the park. I have to leave. He'd feel bad, but he would need to follow the bacon.
Follow the bacon. Well, Jason, we're getting to the top of the hour. Do we have any chat questions or comments for Carlisle while we have her for a few more minutes?
Yeah, folks, let's get some, any questions you might have, tag me in the YouTube chat, and maybe also on the D Live chat. Hello to everybody on all of the different platforms. Any questions or comments you might have, make sure you tag me. You may also financially gift with your questions or comments. You can do that on Cash App, which you'll find in the description below. And you can also do that on Entropy. And I will go over there now. And I see that we have 2 financial gifts on Entropy. The first is from our dear Mrs. Jess Horst, financially gifting $5. Thank you, dear sister. And she gives us a little white heart emoji. I love the little white heart emojis. And then we have the great... Horst. Yes, indeed. A big thank you. We have the great Irish Ice with us, financially gifting also $5. Thank you so much, good brother. He writes, hi, everyone. I've been having loads of success undermining and delegitimizing the regime's anti-white narrative by using government injection free instead of unvaccinated, which now means the evil person in the minds of many millions. Hail. Well, thank you so much, Irish Ice, for getting out there and experimenting with some new potential MCs. Irish Ice is doing so much great work up there.
Yeah, Irish Ice, I'd be curious to hear how people respond to that. If it stops them in their tracks and they don't have anything to say, or if you get any pushback, keep us abreast of how you're using that term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to add in too, as we are at the top of the hour and at most 15 more minutes, folks. So if you have any questions or comments, get them in now. But I did want to also add another MC from iteration 2 of second edition of Go Free, which is available on Amazon, available at NoWhiteGuiltCollectibles.com. And on Amazon, it's also available now as a Kindle. And remember, if you have the Kindle version of second edition, version or iteration 1, you can merely download the iteration 2, and therefore it will be free to you. So whenever we hit a new edition, the subsequent iterations on Kindles are free to you. So keep that in mind as well when you acquire Go Free from NoWhiteGuiltCollectibles.com. you of course get a signature with it as well. Won't get there as quickly as Amazon. Some people can't, don't seem to be able to remember that it's not like Amazon when you buy from someplace other than Amazon. It's more like pre-Amazon time frame. So just keep that in mind when you make a purchase. And I will get to that, MC, in just a moment. But we just had JK160 financially gift $15. Thank you so much, good brother. And he writes here, great show. Of course, it's a great show. It's Tap. And we have Carlisle Cockatoo with us. Thank you so much. And great to see you, JK160. And the MC that I wanted to mention before we tap out today is where one is harmed, all are harmed. So you can also say victimized. Where one of us is victimized, all of us are victimized. This is an extremely important meme curative, because there are going to be folks who say to themselves, white people are just, generally speaking, because of the anti-white narrative we grow up with, because of the anti-white morality that we are subjected to over the course of our lives, white people are cowards, and they will do anything they can to escape any sort of victimization that is ultimately coming for them because they're white. But they will, in the moment, happily escape under almost any excuse. And here you have the excuse of people who will say, well, it doesn't bother me, I haven't flown in 30 years, or something of this nature. Doesn't bother me that you're going to have to get a forced medical treatment because I live out in the woods, and I never go to the doctor, and I only go to the general store once a month, or whatever it might be. And of course, there are less severe or radical examples that we could give of people who believe that they're going to be able to escape this for a time, or I'm a government worker, or I'm a whatever, and I'm going to have this waiver because that person is anti-white, or whatever it might be. Remember, where one is harmed, all are harmed. Where one is victimized, all are victimized. We need to learn this because we don't do it well. In fact, we do it the worst out of all the races. They are now, of course, the context also lends itself to the other races working together in this way, and undermines us when it comes to being able to work together as a collective. Nonetheless, we have demonstrated such individualism that it is one of the saddest elements and chapters of the Western kind, that so many of us will just use any excuse to escape. And we need to remember, when we see that suffering on one of our brothers or sisters out there, that suffering is going to find us. It's going to find us sooner or later. And so we need to stand together. You may be one of the people who say that you will happily get all the vaccines. You'll fly and you'll love it. You'll love getting all the vaccines. But you're going to have brothers and sisters out there who are not going to want to participate in a medical, specific medical treatment. Maybe this one today, maybe a different one tomorrow. And you need to stand by them and their desire to stand aside of that and still be able to exercise this privilege to be able to fly. And remember, of course, don't participate with the anti-white arguments that this is some sort of superfluity and being able to fly from one place to another. If your life is suddenly reduced to your ability to drive from A to B, that is a radical change. And so you need to stand by those brothers and sisters who do not want to participate in a medical procedure that they have no desire to participate in. Where one is harmed, all are harmed. Keep that on the tip of your tongues. Any other thoughts we have here? Does Carlisle know any Q boomers? Now, we don't really use, this is OG Snoop, we don't really break people up. I know what you mean. We don't really break people up by the generational thing. So there are people, I mean, you're asking about older people who were into Q. There were plenty of younger people into Q as well. But he's at OG Snoop is asking if you know of any Q boomers, and did you ever cross paths with anybody of any age who was into the Q phenomenon? Of course, we on this channel, we believe whatever CNN says. And I believe CNN said that the whole Q thing was nonsense. And so therefore, we agree with CNN. But the question is to you, Carlisle.
Well, so yes, because of my job, I have I have come in contact with folks that are definitely Q fans. I actually was gifted a button that has I think I'm keeping it because eventually, I don't know, it might be illegal at this point to own it. I'm not sure. But eventually it might be like sellable on eBay, but it's like one of those little buttons that you pin on your shirt, and it has the big Q on it, and then it says where we go one, we go all, and it's definitely one of a kind. But the Q folks that were visiting my boss gifted us with those buttons, so I have been in contact with those that are Q fans. My position on Q is that I feel bad for those people, because I do think that it is mainly a distraction. And I think that it's sad, because when you see people investing a lot of time and energy into digging into something that is sort of orchestrated to keep them busy, it's just sad because it's a distraction from real issues.
Yeah, it's a great example of the failure that we see so many commit in the white sympathetic sphere, of doom documenting and doom dissecting as the substance of their activism. You're doing nothing. You're doing nothing. There's a place for absolutely for doom documenting and doom dissecting, but it cannot be activism. It's more of a support structure for activism. What happened with people who were in the Q phenomenon, and of course there are people who pointed out that there were, not saying it was the exact same thing, but there are people who pointed out that the whole Q phenomenon is actually a psych warfare operation, or not the Q phenomenon was, but that the way it operated, the mechanics of it was just like a psych warfare operation, where they busy the population with this idea that there is this secret group of people that support your positions, and so therefore you don't have to do anything other than to know that those people exist, and to just emotionally feel that you support them, that in your mind you say you support them, and that somehow constitutes something in the real world. It constitutes squat, jack squat. There's nothing there. And so, in fact, I remember I shared with you all one time this woman, and she's an older lady, and she's got a colossal channel on YouTube, and she talks about the Q stuff all the time. And she said she ran down this list of predictions that these I don't know, these Q wizards or whatever they called themselves had made, and every single one was false. Nothing came true. And then she said, "But we still love it," with a big smile on their face, and a smile on her face. And then she said, "And why do we love it? Because it's fun." I said, that's it. That's all there is to it. They think that they're doing something. They're having fun while wondering what could be going on, or talking about all of the doom, talking about who is behind it with the doom dissecting. That constituted fun for these people. So this is a lesson we should learn. You shouldn't have to always learn lessons by your own by your own actions, by the things that injure you. Like, you can learn not to touch the stove by seeing someone else get burnt, right? You shouldn't have to touch it. And so you shouldn't have to go through the whole years of doom documenting and doom dissecting to finally say, whoa, I guess this actually is nothing. I guess it actually accomplishes nothing. We do have another financial gift, though, from the great Brad C. And he financially gifts $10. And he says, Promethean hails. God bless you, brother. And great seeing you as always. A great champion in service to white well-being. I think Jared might have had something to say on the Q phenomenon and doom dissecting and doom documenting. Jared, I saw you on mute there for a moment. Is that the case, or was I having an hallucination?
No, nothing big. I just know I haven't looked into this myself, so your mileage may vary, but there are people who also talk about historical precedents where there was something called Operation Trust in the 1920s, when there was initially some kind of, at the time called communist, anti-whites that called themselves communists, increasing infiltration in the U.S. Obviously, at that point, you weren't that far out from 1913, that very significant year, 1913. So maybe there was a ramp up of certain things. And in the ways that information was disseminated then, well before the internet, there was still this whole thing with Operation Trust that basically had the same, it was a holding pattern, same kind of thing with Q. So anyone that's interested in possible historical parallels may want to look into that as well. I haven't looked into it myself. It's just a quick thought I had, but I wasn't necessarily going to mention it. It's not super important. But when you saw me, we've worked together so long, Jason and I are so close, he could see just a little glint in my eyes if I might have something to say. So that's what was crossing my mind.
Well, that is actually kind of relevant because I do think that the government operates in patterns. That people in charge tend to operate in patterns. And when something has worked before, it'll be used again because why not? It worked before. I would like to say about the Q people that, in fairness to them, they are some of the best examples of just constant optimism that I have ever seen, because these folks, I mean, nothing panned out the way they predicted it, but every time they would still be like, trust the plan. And then there would be a new, like, contrived, like 3D underwater chess backwards, upside down way that it was going to come out in their favor, and it was still going to work out for them. And I love that kind of optimism. I mean, I am a big supporter of optimism. So hats off to them.
I think that might be called.
How can we get them over this way? How can we get them over this way and kind of balance? I'm an optimist too, but again, we have to be careful because we're also talking about forces manipulating that optimism into, as Jason so well spoke to, and I know you understand as well, Carlisle, into apathy. It might not feel like apathy, but in effect, it's apathy because it's not really doing anything. It's a cul-de-sac. It's a dead end.
Yeah. If you're trusting the plan, then you don't feel the need to be active or even concerned because the plan is underway.
In whether it's optimistic or pessimistic, whatever flavor it takes, you may have heard me say this on the show before. Anyone that's listened, I always get a flag up when I see something that tells you to put your agency outside of yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a common denominator for me. If it's that's what we're about here. It's you have to assess what you can affect and what some of the things that are outside of your control. You will feel despair if you're trying to go up against those things that are currently outside of your control. But you will feel a lot more meaning in your life, a lot more positivity, a lot more health, mentally and physically, when you can effectively take steps towards the things you really have agency over and can see positive results from that. Because all of us doing those little things in our day-to-day lives, that all forms together and becomes more of a cultural force. And then there's a momentum behind that. And again, that's what we're trying to do here. Some of you may be new. We have people in the chat all the time who are new. Some of them don't really comment yet. They're just kind of checking it out. But if you're new to this, that's kind of a bigger picture thrust, one of the ways you could describe what it is we're doing here.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good point because, the opposition, the people that, the anti-whites that call themselves Democrats, the way they got the power that they got is with the slogan, act local and think global. So it's kind of the same thing. You're saying, well, people need to work on themselves and reach those around them that they can. Well, that's how they started. And they have indeed been able to get to a global level with the bills and the legislation that they're passing. So, acting locally, thinking locally, concentrating on what you can reach instead of just trusting the plan is definitely a better idea.
That is something that we can definitely tap out on. Very well said. Do you have any final thoughts, Carlisle?
I don't, except that I think it is an interesting correlation that this week the COVID Act, which was set to expire, was passed again with absolutely no opposition whatsoever and very little talk about it. A lot of people didn't even show up for the vote. The speaker who was running the vote said that it wasn't in the mood of the House to have an opinion on the bill, or to vote, or to debate the bill. That's what they said. So, but it has passed again. It is extended for another 6 months. This does give the government the ability to act as though we are still in a state of emergency. And I think that's interesting with this bill that's being debated with the airlines, because right now the vaccinations are being given out under the Public Health Service Act, which is 351-44, Section 262. And it basically allows them to give out vaccinations that have not been put through the rigorous years of testing and research that a vaccination would have to go through to be authorized by the FDA. So I think it's interesting that they are, corresponding, that this bill is being brought forward, that you're going to need to be vaccinated to get on a plane, and also the emergency bill for COVID has been reestablished for 6 months, giving them the ability to force vaccinations that have not been put through the rigorous testing that vaccines usually go through.
Yeah, that is really telling. And with especially the so-called Republicans who are supposed to be defending Americans that aren't as necessarily anti-white or anti-white at all, just saying, yeah, I'm not really going to go ahead and bother with that. Everybody should remember these people and remember how politics and voting, we say all the time, we're not going to recapture our destiny with voting or violence. Mr. George, your final thoughts.
Well, I just want to thank Carlisle again for all. And speaking of how you can contribute, we all have our different ways. And I stretch myself here when we talk about political things and social things. I'm really a troubadour, a mere troubadour at heart. So I'm into culture and I'm a musician. So first I actually want to point out that Fornull, who was here earlier as a moderator, put out a very cool song, experimental synth rock track, very unique, but nice and punchy and catchy. He put out on his own channel, Fornellius Nulland, because I think his first channel got nuked by YouTube just yesterday. So go check that out. Not to be confused with our upcoming collaboration. A couple of people made that mistake. I can understand why, because I did a little teaser earlier in the week. He and I are doing more of a classic Southern rock kind of swaggering song, and we're really, really close to it being done. So this is a tried and true collaboration. We both wrote it together. We wrote the music together, and we play different parts on it. So that will be coming out very soon. And then I'll be working on the Great Order song, just one of mine. So that's what I do. I make music. I was talking to my friend Bass Guitarist today in the chat about if we're not going to be able to fly, maybe we'll be on tour buses at some point, because we certainly need our own culture here that's a little outside of the silliness we see from Hollywood and those centers of power. They do not have the right messages for people, and we need something different, and we're working towards that. So that's what excites me, gets me up in the morning, and that is the latest. So go check out Fornull's track. Look out for the collaboration. It's called Eye to Eye. That's the collaboration he and I wrote and play on together, coming out very, very soon. Keep an eye out for that. And check out music.thegreatorder.com. I'm changing my website around a little bit right now. So just go to the music page at the moment if you're listening live. But other than that, Jason and I have the afterparty.tv together, this show and his Going Free, our catalog there, along with some other projects. You can see the whole history over 3.5 years now that Jason and I have been streaming together. I'm sure we're going to do something fun next week for Halloween, maybe some friends, maybe Carlisle, if you want to stop in. I don't know if you have a masquerade ball to attend or anything like that, or hopefully nothing where they're forcing you into some strange situation underneath the Capitol And you have to be careful when you're there with those interesting people in DC.
I'm not important enough to get invited to those events.
I wouldn't take them up on that invitation to go to some underground ball in a bunker under the Capitol. You probably don't want to be involved in anything that's going on there.
No, absolutely not. I try to be involved in as little as possible that goes on there. That is such a toxic environment.
It sounds wise. But yes, Jason and I'll be doing a Halloween thing. Keep a lookout for that. Follow us on social media. Love to you all. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Share around what we're doing. If you're new here, then welcome. I hope you check it out more. We're coming from a place of love. That's what we're about. But love does not mean not having strong boundaries and self-defense as well. We just like to think we're offering a very robust, harmonious, well-balanced way to navigate through some of these times. We offer that to you. We have a great community here of self-starters. So many people doing amazing projects. Again, look back through some of the recent shows on the afterparty.tv to see what people have been doing. And again, we may have some friends from the community, being that Halloween's coming up. We like to do holiday shows to kind of talk to friends and do a little recap of things going on in the wider circles of our community here. So that's what we'll be doing. Jason.
That sounds like fun.
It does sound like fun. I'm very excited to hear Fornell and Jared's song coming out, and Fornell's new song. I just sent him at the beginning of the show a message asking him to send it over to me, so I hope I can have it for everybody on Sunday. I
should say his solo song that he just released is called "Fill the Void." Fill the Void. Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait to play it tomorrow, and I'll hear it. Maybe I'll wait to listen to it with everybody else so that I get a genuine reaction during the show. That would be fantastic. But I want to give a big thank you to everybody who participated. And okay, so they already sent it. Everybody who participated in the conversation today in the live stream, it's been marvelous. I want to give a big thank you to everybody who financially gifted. I want to tell, I think his name was, if he's still around, Brian McClung, to go to hell. And well done, Raymond, for getting rid of that Aunt Nat loser. He showed up to say just another echo chamber because we actually shared meme curatives, constructive things to go into your world with friends, family. I'm gonna point this out, the big differences when they happen. When they come in to try to slander, I'm gonna point out the big differences, and I hope that they cry crocodile tears. But we pointed out constructive things that you can do during this TAP episode in conversations with your friends, family, and strangers for the benefit of our people with the purpose of recapturing our destiny. Going through is a practice that works, unlike playing Hitler. That doesn't work. You just are an idiot. You are a loser and a bitch of the anti-white regime. And it is an anti-white regime. So you guys need to grow up and stop being such children, LARPing all the way through your adulthood, and especially LARPing to leaders like the ones that you have. So keep that in mind. Go to hell, Brian McClung, and you will not be allowed back because you are now banned. And I want to give a big thank you again to everybody who financially gifted. And we see that we also had a Greek American in the question widget saying, "Hail TAP, thank you NWG and the Great Order. Thank you very much, Carlisle." Well, thank you so much for that, Greek American. And OG Snoop over here, financially gifting late in the program, $10. Thank you so much, OG. And he writes, he would disagree with my opinion on doom documenting. He says, you got to break a few eggs before you can make an omelet. Fictitious documenting is silly, though. Well, OG, I would say that you're first of all, we need to figure out whether or not we're talking about the same thing when it comes to doom documenting. We advocate something productive, and that is if there is a terrible story that went on in the world, you take that story. You don't need more than one terrible story. And you go to your friends, family, or strangers, and you talk about that thing, and you infuse the lexicon, the concepts that we use in Going Free, to empower them so that they then, seeing that these concepts work, because they do, it's proven, will adopt some of them right off the bat, what they can remember, and then they will end up passing those empowering concepts on to their friends, family, and strangers. Doom documenting is when you just imbibe all the things that are horrible. You go to people's channels, you pick up people's books, you read their books, and they tell you one thing after another about how horrible things are. And that, my friend, is utterly useless. You can do nothing with it. You will feel depressed as a consequence of it. And when you go to share all of that doom with somebody else, you will depress them as well. And they'll think there's nothing that can be done. That's what doom documenting is. And if you were thinking exactly what I just said and you still disagree with me, then your retort is a platitude. And that, my friend, is not an argument. So you need to come back with an argument and we can talk about it then. I appreciate the being civil in the disagreement. I always do. I have a long reputation for being willing to have a discussion that is at its core disagreement, as long as it is civil. I want to thank our great moderators, Forno and Ray, for doing what has to be done in these difficult days, especially when those little chirping voices of pipsqueakery from the Ant-Nats come chirping on over to try to misrepresent and complain and say, but you're not playing Hitler like you should be playing. Well, exactly. We are not about that. We're completely different. We're not in your world. We're not in your silly little story. We're not in your anti-white narrative. We are beyond that. And we are saving our people as a consequence. We love every single one of you. And it's been a magnificent show. I want to thank Carlisle for showing up. She's always a fantastic guest and has magnificent information for us every single time she shows up. This, not the least of the magnificent information that she has shared. So thank you so very much. A big thank you, debt of gratitude also to my dear brother in arms here, the great Jared George, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure that you follow all of his work on his channel and his, and of course on our joint website, theafterparty.tv, that he mentioned. And because the hours are running fewer and fewer all the time, folks, we need as many people as we can to become empowered with those 5 key concepts and more. We need to empower ourselves with the concepts in Going Free so that we can recapture our destiny. There's no amount of bravado that's going to do it. We got to get smart. The dummies won't make it through the